alongside part-time jazz musician.
Oh, yeah.
No. The Quiet Storm.
Oh, yeah.
With Roy Nogaltree.
I'm gonna drop out of this and do the Andre 3000 and just play the flute.
Yeah, play the flute.
Yeah, that's
Play
it.
the flute. Yeah.
Are you dropping a rap album? No, it's just the flute.
Just the flute. No, yeah, okay.
What do you mean? No, it's exactly what I told you.
You told me that I owed the record company another album. Yeah. So it's flute.
I was in the record store, by the way, and that they had that album on sale, and I had to explain to my wife.
Garrett says
it's
good.
not bad.
Is it not bad?
If you get over the disappointment of wanting another Outkast album or Andre to come drop bars, and you embrace the fact that it is a dude that's one of the best musicians ever, like using an instrument that I typically wouldn't jam out to, like he kills it.
Yeah, is it like Ron Burgundy, like jazz flute, like that bit, or is it?
It's not that bad. It's an acquired listen. I'll just put it like that.
Yeah, I was just trying to explain to my wife. I was like, you know Outkast, right? She's like, yeah. It's like, you know Andre 3000. Like, Hey Ya would have been like her most noticeable thing for Andre. And I was like, that, he just put out a jazz flute album. And she was so confused. Yeah. I was like, no, it's exactly what it sounds like. And then the first track on the album called I Owe the studio label another record. So this is, I think that's what it's called.
Let me look at that.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's probably what it is, you know. And like, so they did the album that was the Speaker Box and the Love Below, and that was when you knew they were breaking up. And I think they're actually cool now.
Well, they did an ACL set recently, a few years ago.
Yeah, they're cool now, but like that was just at the point where, you know, how those things work is like you get two musicians in a room, and then, well, what was at the time Bad Boy Records, right?
Yeah,
they were with Bad Boy. So Bad Boy Diddy just, you know, grinds out like you're going to do all this stuff, and so they're doing like, you know, 600 songs together, of which 100 we'll ever hear, and.
The first song on the album is called "I Swear I Really Wanted to Make a Rap Album."
Yeah, it's way longer than that. But yeah, I was looking. But yeah, it's like a super long title, but it's really, really funny. Anyway, that story comes from when we were talking about board operators, and I was saying I got on there one Friday night because that's exactly what college interns want to do on a Friday night is board operate for high school football games. But I needed the money, and I got on there and I said, yeah, y'all have about like 30 seconds before you come on air. And like, I sometimes think my voice is pretty monotonous, but it was Tom Barfield or somebody on the other end back when ESPN was when y'all were doing like 10 games a night or something like that. And he goes, what's your name? I said, Roy Nogaltree. He goes, this is Smooth Jazz with Roy Nogaltree. I've never forgotten that.
I'll tell you, so... I mean, we do it more often than we should, but I do have to tell, like, this happens in radio. It's not just us, but my personal experience with it. So these Friday night high school football games, we were doing 4 to 5 broadcasts a night. Like we
it was
had
a lot.
Every station that we had available, we would sell it. So we had Midway and Copper's Cove and Robinson and China Spring and
Temple
and Belton, and like we had all these broadcasts. And so it was a good revenue generator for the station. But the problem is that, and owners don't quite realize this, that like every time that you add a broadcast, you add a broadcast crew, which includes at least 4 people. You know, you need maybe 3 to 4 people. Like you can do one with 2 if one person on site knows how to work the equipment. That's not always necessarily the case. And we'll get to.
And by the way, it wasn't really like complicated. You like go and plug in like into a phone line.
But then you also have to get a producer to run the game back at the radio station. Now there's methods now where you can do everything on site. You don't really need it. You just need to be able to log into wherever you're broadcasting from and send it out. But back then it wasn't there yet. And so you'd have to have a board op. And so board ops are, by and large, minimum wage employees.
It was nothing.
Yeah, it's minimum wage. That's what it is. So you need to make sure that, even though this is kind of a thankless job, that your minimum wage employees are comfortable and happy and focused and enthusiastic about their ability to get into the radio business and know that this is a bit of a rite of passage.
Yeah.
You do not need to treat them like they are human garbage and yell at them constantly for minor mistakes that they make that you may know about because you've been in radio for 100 years, and they are a college student who's making $7.50 an hour.
What the hell? You didn't take that break on time.
Yeah, like yell at them like, okay, so you just have to roll with it. You're not listening to 1930s radio plays where, there's just a guy in the studio who's doing everything, like making the sound effects and another thing where it's all there. Like you are, there's one guy and a computer and a board that's doing all this stuff. Well, we had several people who would just come in and berate the board ops, and then we would lose at least every year. And I think this is why Royden, and this is one of the reasons I love Royden. Royden was just a regular intern for the first half of the football season. Second half of the football season, our owner had just dogged this part-time board op that worked on Thursday and Friday nights and some Sundays. So much he's like, screw this. I'm going to join the Air Force.
Remember that?
Yeah, I was like, that's basically what it was. Like,
anything is better than this.
Yeah, anything's better than this. Screw it. And literally walked out Gary yelled at him. Dude leaves in the fourth quarter of a broadcast. And luckily, one of the broadcasts was about to end. And the producer said, hey, you guys can't really do a post-game show. Like, this one's in the fourth quarter. Like, as soon as this thing's over, you guys got to end it. And that broadcast's like, oh, no, totally understand. And so they ended it, moved on, and they, got to run the fourth quarter of this other one. But he walked out because, you're going to yell at me. All right. Double birds to you, buddy. Again, I was here for 4 hours. I made $28. So
I can go work at Buc-ee's for more money.
Exactly. So that's why. So he lost it. So Broyden stepped in, and we're like, hey, we need to board up. And I remember sitting and talking, look, if you think this is a pathway to greatness, it's not. It's really, it may be or may not be, but we just need somebody to be here. He'd already been helping out with the scoreboard show on Friday night, so he kind of had a general idea of how it wasn't all that complex, but you have to pay attention. So he was like, yeah, I'll do it. That's fine. And that was that. But yeah, I remember that broadcast crew that night, sending me a text like, hey, do you know that our board op quit in the fourth quarter? And then another guy had to come in. I'm like, yeah, I'm aware. This was told to me while I was in the midst of calling a game myself. So you're just looking at Smokey, that was a great third down pass there. Okay. What is it now? It's 1st and 10 from the 28. And then he looks at me and I'm like, I roll my eyes, and then it's almost telepathy of what happened?
Yeah.
Worry about it later.
I gotta real quick before we get into the talk, I gotta tell a story about calling the game on Thursday night. It was Temple versus Harker Heights, who Harker Heights went and won an outright district title. But now Temple has to go play Duncanville. It was a really pivotal swing game for both teams. It had rained and rained and rained, just a downpour in Temple. And all of a sudden, it was I was soaked, and it was freezing in that Temple broadcast booth. And we had talked to Vern Lundquist earlier or in the day, or heard him speak at the Sports Hall of Fame. And he was great and magnanimous and awesome storyteller, and it was awesome. And he talked about the Fog Bowl. And I was like, that's crazy. I can't imagine calling a game in where you can't see anything and having to listen to the PA announcer say who made a tackle or whatever. That night, the entire window of the entire broadcast booth, because it had rained and it was freezing inside, fogged over. And Dan and Ingham and I were like, I think that was number 5 that made the tackle. We were having to look at our broadcast. Luckily, we had a monitor, but we were if anybody watched, I don't know if anybody did, but we were yeah, that was, he drops back to nope, he hands it off. 5-yard gain. And anyway, somebody got up on the roof with a squeegee and was hanging down and squeegeeing the glass in front of us so we could see. Last game of the year, I couldn't see who was on the field.
Yeah. Brad Sham will tell this story anytime we get him on, and I love to kneel him to tell it. But anytime they've ever played Washington, the visitors booth at what it used to be I don't know what it is now, but it used to be FedEx Field. But at the stadium, is like in this weird corner of one end zone where you can't see like a third of the field on the way down. So when the action moves, he has to, before every game, knowing this is going to happen, the replay booth, fortunately, the replay booth with a big, gigantic screen that they look at is right next door. So he has to go tell them, like, hey, look, I'm just telling you that when they get over on this side of the field, I'll be watching. I'm not trying to steal state secrets here. I'm just actually trying to do my job. And so now they just know. They're like, hey, well, it's just a courtesy to go and be like, hey, you're doing this. But it was like every team in the league complained to Dan Snyder, and he's like, you know what? Like part of him was like, I might take that TV out. So every broadcaster in the NFL will be thrilled when Washington changes that. The thing is when they build the new stadium wherever it's going to be.
Have you ever seen the vibe shift? And we'll talk about our NFL teams later. But have you ever seen the vibe shifts from an NFL team once like one owner just is gone?
Yeah,
the vibes were horrendous. Dan Snyder goes away, and all of a sudden vibes are great. Vibes are awesome in Washington.
Oh, it's amazing! It's amazing as a fan.
Oh, are you a Commanders fan?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just it's the weirdest vibe shift I've ever seen, and it's all because the owner just sold the team.
Well, I mean, it's like been 20 plus years of misery.
Yeah,
and it's been a long time coming.
It's a crazy coincidence. I don't even know if it's a coincidence, but yeah,
it's not a coincidence at all. Like, you know, hey, we're not getting sexually harassed in the office.
Oh yeah, that's
nice.
That will go a long way.
The owner like cares about us. Like, hey, all the desks have like wobbly legs. Work on the floor. I don't care.
Yeah.
What do you want from me? I'm buying another yacht. You don't have money to spare.
Hey, the field turf is a hazard to all who step onto it.
They're men, aren't they? They're football players. Back in the day, you didn't hear Sammy Baugh complaining about the grass, did you? I don't know. He's been dead for quite a while.
Sammy Baugh played on 2 torn ACLs. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You want a functional brain when this is over? I'm sorry. Anyway, all right. So, Roy, we're going to start out with this clip from Tim Brando was on our show yesterday. I asked him about Penn State and why I should not feel why should I support Penn State as a playoff team over teams like Wazoo, like Boise State, and Army.
Yeah.
And this was his answer. It's about 2 minutes long. Tim, I need you to make an argument for me why Penn State, even though they only have one loss, should not have the same kind of scrutiny that Army, Boise State, or Wazoo would have.
Because they're so good on the defensive end of the ball, and because they're in every game, and their offense has let them down. Kolonicki had an awful game play calling, and I thought he was the strength of what they were like in the beginning of the year when they looked so good at the beginning of the season. If you recall, I thought West Virginia might beat them to start the year, and they got absolutely boat raced by them. And I thought Andy Kolonicki was a great addition. It's clear that not having him hurt Kansas, particularly early in the season, if not now, they're coming around now, but they got to win out even to get to a bowl, and they've been really a disappointment up until recently in the Big 12. But their defense is just next level, and I think that's a lot of it. Now, they're not pretty to watch by any stretch, but their defense has been outstanding, and I think that's going to carry them. Now, the schedule in and of itself isn't the strongest. I'll give you that. But the case for Penn State would be the same case that you'd have for a team that maybe you think is overrated in the SEC. It's not unlike Alabama's. The metrics are on their side, okay? Mm-hmm. The Big Ten metrics for their teams, because of the level of the metrics, the way the analytics work for the committee members to look at, even with a lesser schedule than a lot of other teams in the Big Ten, it still measures out to be, from an analytical standpoint, in front of the papers that those people are looking at, it looks better than a second or a third team out of either the ACC or the Big 12. And that's what I'm concerned about.
All right. So, yes, the ACC and Big 12 have a Penn State problem as well. But I like
Penn State affects all counting
it does.
metrics.
Well, here's the thing: Penn State's going to fall ass backwards into this. They don't have a strength of schedule that's worth it. Now, granted, their defense has been great, but is their defense great because they don't play anybody?
Chicken or the egg?
Yeah. So it's all of this, and I think their defense is good anyway. I'm not saying that, but
Yeah, they're holding people to like 10 points a game. Like,
yeah. But the historical evidence thing has got to go. It's got to go because we need to because it's not fairly applied, because it's only applied in certain circumstances to certain things. Because you'll say historically the Big Ten is better than the Mountain West. Yeah, that's true. It does not matter, though, that historically it's better. That doesn't come into play when we're talking about who's better today when we're making playoff rankings. That's my issue with it.
Yeah.
And so also, historically also, when Penn State plays somebody, particularly when James Franklin has been there, that is ranked higher than them or even close to them, even below them, if Penn State's 7th and the other team's 11th, guess who's winning? Number 11 is winning. That's who's winning. James Franklin does not win these games, but you're going to give him credit for some shit that Joe Paterno did? No! Stop! It's madness.
Yeah, I don't think
Let's talk about this year right now. And Penn State is my example, but I could honestly, I could make the same thing about Miami. I could almost do it about Tennessee. Almost. Tennessee, though, has some good wins, especially the one over Alabama. And the SEC does not have the drop-off between the top, the middle, and the bottom that the Big Ten does. The Big Ten, top, middle, bottom, whoosh, drop-off.
Yeah, but the bottom of the SEC is still
the bottom's still the bottom. The middle is that's really where the SEC has it, where the top teams are always really, really good. The middle teams are where
they have a higher floor.
They have a higher floor than the Big 12's middle teams. Although the problem with the Big 12 is they're all the middle teams.
Everyone's the middle child.
Yes. So everybody in the Big 12 could easily, to me, go to the SEC and be pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And if you'd like my example of that, I'll give you 3. Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Missouri, all in the middle of the SEC. And Missouri and A&M, middle of the SEC is where they were. So, yes, they didn't go and win it, but they are solidly not the bottom of the league. Missouri and A&M are better over their time in the SEC than Vanderbilt has been over that time, than Mississippi State has been over that time, than South Carolina has been over that time, and those teams were in it than Arkansas has been over that time. So that's 4 teams in the league that they're better in no matter what. Ole Miss, you can pretty much throw them in.
I was going to say they've had higher highs than what Ole Miss has.
Yeah, they've had higher highs than Ole Miss. They've actually, in the time that they've been in the league until the last 3 seasons, had a way better go of it than even Tennessee has. And that's a classic old school SEC team.
All you have to do is go back to when Texas A&M and Missouri went in for the first time, which is I think what you're getting at. And they had recruited, quote unquote, all Big 12 players.
Yeah.
And then Missouri went and was in the SEC championship game, and Texas A&M went and won a Heisman. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So those were
had 10 wins, had one of their best seasons in a while.
Missouri and A&M did not have the seasons that they were never Bama. They were never Georgia. They were never.
And they've
LSU.
never run away with it. No,
never Bama, Georgia, or LSU. But A&M has been about the same, save for one season, as Auburn. Maybe even better, slightly record-wise better than Auburn. Although I think their series is pretty much split. But they've been as good as Auburn has over this time, save for 2013. They've been better than Florida has in the time, because Florida hasn't really been on the national scene except a couple times. And if you look at the great Dan Mullen season that they had, that's about a good A&M or Mizzou season. So
it's equal to, quite literally. It's 10,
exactly.
10,
it's the same thing.
Wins.
So if you want me to say who has been better than A&M and Missouri and particularly I'll just say A&M because Missouri's been further down the list until the last couple of years. But A&M, the joke is 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 7-5. They had a couple of 5-7 years, but they're mostly 8-4 and 7-5 in the decade plus that they've been in the SEC. All right, well, the only teams who are consistently better than that are LSU, Georgia, and Alabama. So A&M came from the Big 12 to the SEC, and nothing changed about them. So that's the difference, is that the middle of the SEC is consistently solid, but the middle of the SEC is essentially what every other power conference is. So if you took any team in the Big 12 and moved them over there, like unless they're just really, really shitty, they're going to be the middle of the SEC. Now, can they be the top? Probably not, because you've got three teams that, because of the Saban influence, and look, LSU was even winning. I think the Saban influence at LSU lasted through Miles and Orgeron because he kind of showed them, here's what you do. And then those two were smart enough to go, well, if this is the ingredient, we just need to do this. And it took, some different things. But when Saban came to Alabama and then, Georgia, gets better when Kirby Smart gets there, Georgia was more consistent than Alabama pre-Saban because Mark Richt, pretty much had them in the SEC title game every other year. They just couldn't close.
Going back to Penn State, we made this argument last week, right? Where it's like, in the Brando argument, I guess, is solid because it's like, what's going to carry you in these playoff games is going to be your defense, especially when we play more and more games and people have more and more film on your offense, so on and so forth, that you want a solid defense when the weather gets cold and you're playing these teams. But it's the same argument that was used, and old hobby horse of ours, it was the same argument that was used to keep Florida State out of the playoff. Now, the quarterback factor was a thing, yes. But it's like all of a sudden, their offense isn't really good anymore.
Yeah.
Well, has Penn State's offense been good, period, for like 2 years? People will look at Drew Aller's counting stats last year and say, yeah, he was really efficient. They had a really efficient offense and a great running game. It's boring. And to his point, it's not good. And if we're going to use the same metric of, well, their defense is really solid, so that should get them in, but their offense, it's all about the TV product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if that's what we're saying,
yeah.
Or subliminally, that's what we've said. I don't want to watch Penn State.
Yeah,
and maybe that's unfair.
No, but
like this is the same argument that was used to keep.
To be fair to Brando, he was very much on Florida State's side last year.
Oh yeah, well, but it's the same argument that was used to keep out Florida State. You know what I'm saying? Like I think
that's the thing. I think
when you don't play anyone and your offense is still bad, what's the draw?
Now, Drew Aller has played well, and he was hurt, I guess, against Ohio State, and they did have a shot to win that game, but again, they didn't, and I feel that history is being unevenly spread across. Boise State is being punished for a bunch of years where the Mountain West wasn't that good. But if you watch Boise State play, they can hang with anybody. And if you watch some of the other teams play, I'll just use this example. I'll tell you the one team, if Miami can hold on and their defense can be good enough and they can get in, if they can hold on and get in and say they're 11-1 and they win the ACC, so 12-1 and they get in, they do not want to see Ashton Genty in the first round.
No,
and look, nobody does, but I'll tell you, particularly Miami, because the one thing that they do bad at, and this is our next segment of, playoff teams, red flags, the one thing they're bad at, really, really bad at, is when you hand the ball off or just take it and run with it, they're not good at stopping you right away.
How far back are we going in this history thing?
That's the other thing.
Okay, so does Boise State beat Oklahoma? Are we going back that far? They beat them in the
exactly. So, but
Tostitos Bowl. Are we going back that far? Are we going back to Jimmy Johnson? How far back are we going?
But there are outliers and then there are other things. Well, if you have to apply it all evenly. You can't just go, well, here and here, and this is where we're going to apply the history and where we're going to apply this thing. And that's where this committee has always been kind of muddled. Now
BYU was really good in 1991. Like, how far back?
Yeah, exactly. But like you have to look at the metrics right now, and you can't give them credit for that. And like part of it is, I think it's an unconscious thing of, or it might be very conscious. Look, if there's Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, those teams in this thing, that the ratings are going to be great.
Yeah.
What I will tell you is the ratings are going to be great no matter what the 12 teams are. Like, people will be here to watch it. Now, will they be more with more popular teams in? Yes. The ratings for the World Series when the Dodgers and Yankees are in is going to be higher than a, Royals, Reds World Series. That's fine. But the thing is that
football has this inherent viewership in it, and the playoffs do too, that isn't like baseball.
Exactly.
People know three baseball teams.
I'll
and your hometown team.
But I'll ask you this. Has Fox decided not to carry the World Series because of the fact that it's not Dodgers and Yankees or Red Sox and Giants every year? No. They're carrying it regardless. Are they bummed when the ratings are a little lower? Yeah. But have they ever been sad enough to go, that's it, we're out of the baseball business? No. Sports are cyclical. The NFL has had some Super Bowls from medium market teams. They've had Super Bowls that are lower rated than others. Because they have a Brady versus Mahomes Super Bowl a couple years ago during COVID that no one was there and everybody's watching everything at home that had great TV numbers and then might have dropped the next year a little bit. Like, were they sad because of the drop? Maybe a little. Maybe that means that they can't go to the advertisers and ask for this much money. They've got to shave off $500,000 per ad spot, but they're still going to make money. They're still going and going and going. Same thing with that. The only league that's really suffered from low ratings where their network contract got dropped was the NHL, and that was of their own doing because they went on strike for 2 years. So, what happened to the NHL was they found out that, they were in a lot of pockets of the country that they were relatively new in, like Florida and Texas and Georgia and, Carolinas and all that they were new in where people don't play hockey all year round or didn't. And so when they were gone for 2 years, they realized, I'll just watch more baseball or basketball. I don't miss hockey that much as far as my necessary viewing. So they had to earn that back. Now, they've done a great job of it because now they have a television contract that spans 3 different networks as opposed to the one that was just ESPN for 5 years. So they're doing better. Garrett, I'm right on this, aren't I?
You are.
Yeah. So they're doing better. The NBA, better and better, get more and more viewership all the time.
The ratings for NBA, to your point, have kind of plateaued, but that hasn't stopped from ESPN for shilling out $1 billion for NBA.
Okay,
ratings.
so the Spurs won 5 championships, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they won. I know they did.
I was thinking 6, but you're right.
Yeah, they won 5 championships. Then the NBA was or the networks were we can't have a team from San Antonio, market number 39, winning all this much. Their superstars boring. We need
does bank shots. What it do?
Yeah. I mean, we know he's the greatest power forward who's ever lived, but let's not get out. Let's not get out of our skis. He plays for San Antonio and not New York, Los Angeles, Boston. They don't do that. They understand it. So the committee needs to get that inherent bias out of their head because it's not like the networks are going to come to them after all the networks have done to influence this in the first place and say, you know what? No.
Yeah.
Because they're going to make money no matter what.
Yeah.
They're going to make money no matter what. And if they don't, it's their own fault because they don't know how to sell it.
Yeah. If you don't know how to sell Ashton Janty or you don't know how to sell the good story of the troops running over everybody, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe would a game, a Georgia-Alabama rematch get more viewership? Yes, absolutely. But not being able to sell a product is of your own doing, because I can get anecdotally, and Twitter isn't a real place. We know that, but like anecdotally, people are gonna like roll their eyes online if we have to see another same old SEC Big Ten matchup again.
You know,
it's like, let me see the running back that's running for 1 billion trillion yards, please.
Do you know why we got the 4-team playoff in the first place? It's because LSU and Alabama played a really boring game.
I fell asleep in that. It was
a
bad,
really
dude.
boring game.
Two boring games.
Yeah, no. They played a really boring game the first time around that LSU won.
Yep.
Then the computer, it was still the BCS. The computers didn't have, like, that's where we said, well, we need we need some kind of combination here. The computers didn't punish Alabama for losing that game, but they sure as hell punished Oklahoma State for losing theirs. You know, and Alabama didn't have to play in the SEC title game. But look, LSU was lucky to beat them the way that they did before because they caught Alabama on a bad night. Then we got a 12-9, 9-6, whatever, awful national championship game
Where LSU didn't cross the 50-yard line until the second half.
Yeah, that
still sticks in your craw a little bit.
That Greg Sankey would like you to not remember. He would like, you know, I'm sure.
Just look at the trophy. Don't look at anything else.
When he got that job from Mike Slive, who was the commissioner at the time, he's like, listen, whenever they bring up that 9-6 game, you pretend like it was January 6th that it didn't. No. You pretend it didn't happen, or it wasn't what everybody saw with their own eyes.
Yeah.
There was nuance to it.
We're gonna throw you in jail.
That's what you pretend. Let's pretend like it's not a thing. It's not a factor. We're gonna leave this alone. So the SEC was the reason that we got the 14 playoff, and then very brilliantly, being the thing that caused this in the first place, like had a corner on it.
Yeah.
Like, no, this was your fault.
Yeah.
Like this, we got here because of your crap championship.
Yeah.
And then they turn it all around. Well, now, like, look, to their credit, they've had some great teams. I'm not knocking that. What I am saying is, like, let's apply history in the fairest sense possible, which we don't. We pick things that we like, you know, out of it.
We'll move on, but like history, depending on who's telling it, it has inherent biases.
Well, yes, okay.
Regardless. I mean, there's a true way to tell it. We can get off into a political spectrum here, but like there's a true way.
Let's talk about, we'll just make it easy. George Washington.
Yeah.
Yes, he was a fantastic general and a great leader, and he had a lot of good ideas for the future of our country that we wildly ignored.
Yeah.
Like, if you read George Washington's farewell letter, it's like the future us was like reading it going, that'll never work, George. Oh, thanks for all your hard work, buddy, but you're stupid. Come on, man. But he also was a slave owner. So, you know, he had some moral, let's call them gray areas. Flaws in that, you know, and look, he was raised to think it was okay. Like, I'm not trying to put today's things on it, but, you know, I've always kind of felt that, like, when it comes to slavery,
use common sense.
We should have maybe known that was bad earlier than we did.
Tosh had a really good bit about that where he's like, these guys had a handful of great ideas. People will get mad in the chat, but like, these guys had a handful of great ideas, and I'm supposed to hold them in this reverence. What are we doing? You can find it online, but it's really.
But like, you know, so again, on the George Washington standard, like, yeah, the SEC has a lot of great things. They also have a lot of stuff that, like, if you brought it up, they're going to be like, well, that doesn't count. Like, no. Everything counts. You know, when we're putting in your historical score, you know, look, I will tell you, I believe the greatest president we ever had, and it will never be equaled, is Teddy Roosevelt, right? And I'm just going this. But he had his problems, too. Like, you know, nobody bats 1,000, you know. And look, he was the one, like, he was like a 330 hitter. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe he was Ted Williams. He's like a 400 hitter, right? He was Ted Williams. He was the best. And then, you know, we've had some other guys that are 330 hitters, you know. But for the most part, we're not talking about guys who are, you know, just like every decision they make is like amazing, you know. FDR couldn't walk. He was married to his cousin, and he had tunnels built in the White House for his whores. Like, he saved our country in multiple ways. But guess what? He loved whoring. And look, He was married to his cousin. She had a hatchet face and he had polio. Let him get it wet. I get it. I'm not saying. I'm not saying.
Drop.
But we have to grade him on the historical scale. You have to have the knocks, right?
We're still talking about football, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So again, I'll use Alabama or Georgia as the example this year. Yeah, they've got some really great things. Like Alabama's got some really great wins. But they got a little polio.
Oh my God.
I mean, let's.
Okay. No, I think that when going back to it, the SEC has been able to, what I think we're talking about here is has been able to make their own history, has been able to write their own history books, and people have been buying them in mass. And I think that is the inherent bias that I think we're scheduling here, that we're facing here. And to an extent, the Big Ten is now starting to, we want to put a little addendum in that book too.
Yeah.
We want to put a footnote in that, and they're starting to make their way into that.
And here's the thing. The Big Ten's recent history is one amazing Michigan team and a bunch of Ohio State.
Yeah, I just think that they're starting we're buying the state sanctioned history book where it's in the Big 12 is hey, we would also, and they're shut your mouth.
Yeah.
We don't speak unless you're spoken to.
Yeah. Also, some great innovations came out of this part of the country. No, they didn't.
Yeah.
The cotton gin was invented in Alabama.
Yeah.
It might have been. I don't know. Where's Eli Whitney from?
This has been history with Paul Catalina.
I think this is a bit that we can do.
I like it. I like the crossover.
Forever. Let's see.
He's probably in Georgia. That sounds about.
Eli Whitney was born in Massachusetts, so
there's that. I just think that judging teams not based on what you're doing currently is how we kind of get into this slippery slope and what we've done since the 14 playoff. And I think that the problem, we're going to go round and round in this until the cows come home and they finally get it right.
Yeah.
But and they will eventually. I kind of have faith that they will eventually. This will kind of sort itself out. There are ugly teams at the end that people are mad at, yada, yada, yada. But I think this will kind of sort itself out after we have a few goes at this.
Yeah.
Nothing new has ever been great, I think, the first time.
Yeah.
And I think this will eventually sort itself out. The problem is that while we're doing this now is that we have no standard metric of how this is supposed to be done still.
Nothing new is ever great the first time is what I told my girlfriend the night I lost my virginity, by the way. That is exactly what I said.
It'll get better.
We've got to hammer away at this. Michelangelo didn't do David in a day. All right. It took some time. So,
and by the way, Michelangelo is still sitting in your garage somewhere.
Yeah. Look,
we're still working at it.
We'll get it. We'll get there. We will get there. It's not you have to, but I just, by the way, I just have to get this joke out of my head because I don't know if it's funny or not. But when I found out that Eli Whitney's from Massachusetts, a state that didn't grow cotton, and he invented the cotton gin, I just imagined him going through the rural South and going why are all these seeds of the cotton? Couldn't you have a little crank to get them out? Doesn't make any sense to me. Come over here. Look what you do. You put this thing in a thing, and then you get the seeds out of the cotton. Right? Okay.
That was
just my.
That was Family Guy does a Eli Whitney cutaway.
Damn sure was.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.